Good afternoon. I call to order the meeting of the Metropolitan Council Transportation Committee for September 25th, 2023. Apologize for starting a few minutes late. Anyone who's on the roads knows that apparently we all forgot how to drive in the rain, so it was really, really slow. So first order of business is approval of the agenda. If nobody has any changes. Very good. Then we can move on to approval of the September 11th, 2023 minutes. Did anyone have changes or additions? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve the minutes.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Vento. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. And the motion carries. Now we're on to employee recognition for Metro Transit. We turn it over to General Manager Canderas.
Right. Thank you, Chair Barber, council members. Today, we are pleased to recognize 4 employees from our Rail Operations Division, 3 of whom could be here today. Today's honorees include 3 people who showed great teamwork, working together to create a new piece of training equipment for our rail signals team, and a train operator whose actions potentially helped save a life. I want to also add that last week we hosted training professionals from across the country who gathered here for the National Traction Power Training Consortium. So I want to thank these and other individuals for helping us successfully host this event, providing instructional designers and trainers a unique opportunity to gather and to learn from one another. This type of gathering is especially important now as we and others work to bring in and support the technicians needed to maintain our rail systems. This is an area where our industry continues to have workforce challenges, so it's really important that we work together and create a strong support network. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Carlos and Ed, who respectively lead our rail systems and rail quality assurance and training departments. So Carlos and Ed, or maybe just Ed. I think Ed
Hello,
Meyer.
Chair Barber and council members. I'm Ed Meyer, Senior Manager of Rail Training. I'm happy to be here today with 2 of the 3 employees to recognize Ona Pradhan, our Manager of Rail Training, and Thomas Rittenauer, our Supervisor of Rail Training. Together they built and designed and relocated a fully functioning gate arm for our training department from our rail support facility to our rail training center, which recently opened adjacent to our Blue Line operation and maintenance facility. Eric originally built the gate arm with some spare equipment at our RSF, and Thomas saw value in it as a training aid. So we moved it, and if you noticed, our gate arms are quite large, and we have a space constraint in the building. So Thomas came up with the idea to install it on a door that's rarely used. Ona's process was to secure funding. She worked with our engineering group to procure power and safe base to install the gate arm. So Eric's collaboration was invaluable in his expertise working alongside Thomas to transition the gate arm to its location seamlessly. Today, thanks to the collective efforts of our training department, our rail systems maintenance, and our engineering group, it stands as a testament to what's achievable when our dedication meets our innovation. So, and the results are that we all have a training aid that will be useful for years to come, to give the technicians hands-on training prior to going out in the field, seeing the equipment they'll be working on. So thanks, Ona. Thanks, Thomas.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. If you just want to hang it up front, I'll hand out plaques to you guys in just a minute.
And Chair Barber, I if, with your permission, like to call Jim Perrin to introduce our other honoree tonight.
Okay. Chair Barber, council members, thank you for this opportunity. Today, I bring before you Bill Blair, who has served as one of our esteemed train operators since 2004, the year light rail began. In August of this year, while Bill was at his terminal down at the Mall of America, he became aware of an unconscious person on his train. He spoke to the person's companion, and when he checked on the victim, he could detect no breathing or heartbeat. Suffering from an apparent overdose, Bill called for EMTs and moved the person to a location where there was room to perform CPR. Mr. Blair continued his efforts at CPR until emergency personnel responded and took over. The good news in this situation is that the person regained consciousness and was speaking to the paramedics prior to reaching the hospital.
Thank you.
Okay.
Oh, wonderful.
amazing.
Thank you very
Absolutely
much.
amazing
Thank you very
story.
much.
Thank you for what you do.
All right. Kind of show it to that person.
Take pictures. We're just dodging around. We're never graceful at this part, so thank you for what you do. So much good.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Always fun to start with that, so thank you for all you do. We really appreciate it. Now we're on to reports. Our first report is we have MTS Services Director Cross.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, council members. I'll start with a good news update to a problem we reported on in April. We had reported that due to supply chain issues, we were seeing delayed replacement for buses for Metro Mobility and other small bus services, part of actually a national issue for this topic. Hundreds of buses that had been due for replacement were well above the council's 175,000-mile replacement policy, with some of our 2014 to 2016 models still in service with over 325,000 miles, which is uncommon. So the update and good news is that we're receiving buses. We have 28 new buses in service and 22 additional buses in the Twin Cities preparing to enter service, and another 66 buses in production. So nationally, more production has been allocated toward transit, in part as the RV industry has scaled back with decreased demand. So we have hundreds more buses on order for delivery in the next few years while we test other options like accessible minivans and other bus types. So we're pleased to be making progress on this topic, but I will end with a note of caution that we've not yet seen any impacts to new bus production or to our current fleet related to the United Auto Workers strike, but it's something we're monitoring closely should production be disrupted. On the finance front, motor vehicle sales tax continues to perform well with year-to-date receipt through August at 113% of forecast, 266 million, about 30 million above the forecast. July and August were particularly high with 115 and 124% of forecast receipts, respectively. This is partly from a change in state law where the motor vehicle sales tax rate increased, although the share of motor vehicle sales tax to transit or to metro area transit decreased. So we ended up with a smaller slice of a bigger pie that netted out about the same. A new forecast was not prepared for the updated rate, so that will be prepared by the state in November, reflecting new forecasts. So national auto market trends drive MVES receipts. In August, 1.34 million new vehicles were sold in the U.S. and production has returned to pre-pandemic levels, but rates are up and prices are still high, and that's beginning to limit sales somewhat. Income growth amongst people has not kept pace with either financing or sales costs. So monthly payments have increased and effectively priced many middle-class Americans out of the new vehicle market. Right now, the average monthly payment on a new car is over $700, with rates over approaching 7%, and an average loan term of 68 months. And that $700 or more is just the start of the cost of owning a vehicle. So meanwhile, unlimited ride passes for the local transit system are well under $100 per month, and cycling costs even less. So it's never been a better time to not own a new car. With that, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions or comments for Charles tonight? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to our next report, which is Metro Transit General Manager Kinderis.
And Chair Barber, council members, I am going to forego a report tonight. We have a lot of information we're sharing with you through the course of our items this evening, but would be happy to take any questions if anyone had any.
Very good. Any questions? All right, then we are moving on. We're not having a tab report tonight. I did talk to Mr. Dugan this morning. At tab, we talked mostly about the TPP and a business item that's coming next time. So he'll join us next time to talk about the discussion on that. But he does send his regards. And so next we are on to our Joint Labor Management Safety Committee report. And we have Andrew Brody and Tom Weiss here to present.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and council members. I'm Andrew Brody. I go pronouns him, his, he.
Tom Weiss with non-revenue.
And here today just to present to you some information from the Joint Labor Management Safety Committee. I'm happy to tell you that it's going very well. We've only had one cancellation due to some conflicts, and that was last week since we met. So been meeting bi-weekly for 90 minutes consistently. We're continuing to review the agency safety plans, both on the bus side and the light rail side. Those have been going very well, and we're starting to make changes on those. And we're also learning from each other and teaching each other the whole safety management system process around the PTAS regulatory requirements. And we've also invited our state safety oversight officer in to, really explain his role in the whole process within safety investigations and things like that on the light rail side. And we continue to discuss, mitigation strategies around many different things. The biggest topic is transit worker assaults, obviously, and how we can help support the workers out there that see it every day, our frontline employees. And we've talked about peer support. That's being restructured right now on the bus operation side. And then most recently, we've, basically are working towards a memo that we can give to General Manager Conderas as a recommendation of what the committee would like to see from a de-escalation training, whether it be different from each department or the same or whatever it may be. And this next meeting, we're prepared to bring options to the committee to review and hopefully get a memo put together. I don't know, Tom, do you have anything to add?
It pretty much sums it up as it's growing pains, but like you said, everything is starting to become more fluid, so.
If there's growing pains, that means you're having good discussions, which is really kind of the key thing in my mind. Questions or comments from council members? I just want to say I appreciate all the work and really taking this very seriously, because as an organization, I know the general manager does very much. Safety and security is key to our success. And I do like that you're bringing options for people in different roles, because not everything's a one-size-fits-all solution. So I think that's really, really great to hear. So thank you so much. And we really do appreciate these updates, and I'm really glad to hear it's going well.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you. All right, now we are on to our non-consent business. The first item is business item 2023-195, Metro B line. And we have two Metro B line business items, 1 and 2. So we'll welcome Frank Alarcon up to. Oh no, Katie Roth. Sorry, I didn't look. I read the paper. I didn't look up. Yeah.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber and council members. Katie Roth, Director, Arterial BRT. Thank you for allowing me the time ahead of these two business items to provide a brief update on Arterial BRT project schedules as they relate to our key partnerships with our local road jurisdictions on the corridor served by Arterial BRT. I just want to highlight on this slide here before I move into this that this week, or last week rather, we passed a major milestone on the project. On Thursday, September 20th, the first shelter was installed on the B-Line corridor. This is just outside of St. Paul College on John Ireland and Marshall. So this is one of our DBE contractors, Bald Eagle erectors, putting in that first shelter, and we'll see many more of these in the weeks to come. So this activity is just the latest on what's been a very productive 2023 construction season on the project. Our contractor, Thomas & Sons, and their subs have successfully completed the bulk of the year's work at this point. Much of this work has been completed by DBEs. Thomas & Sons committed to over 21% DBE participation on the project, which exceeded the 15% goal. As of today, there are 26 platforms that have reached the point you see here of civil completion, with roadway and sidewalk and platform concrete in place. And along with that work, there are 2 brand new pedestrian medians in place and approximately 57 rebuilt accessible pedestrian ramps up and down the corridor. Fiber optic conduit has been bored across the majority of the corridor, and as I mentioned, the shelter installation has begun and will continue in the coming weeks. So the bulk of disruptive construction on the east package is now behind us, east of Hiawatha Avenue, and we want to thank the communities in these corridors for their patience during construction. I also want to just briefly highlight the work that, in particular, Cody Olson on our community outreach team has led over the past year to provide timely and accurate information and to field issues as they've arisen. He's knocked on nearly 1,000 doors in the corridor. He's held over 50 office hours and meetings with neighbors and has fielded nearly 200 individual contacts through our hotline and construction email inbox. So there's more minor work remaining as crews begin paving Lake Street this week and move on to the remainder of these activities noted here. So much more to come, but we are looking ahead to 2024. And as we do that, we'll see the rest of the Beeline corridor come together. So the work in the pink is the focus of 2023. Next year, we will see the Metro Gold Line stations in downtown St. Paul be completed. Those will be shared by the Gold Line and the Beeline. We also have a couple of major coordinated projects that will take shape next year. Notably, Hennepin Avenue South will be reconstructed, and Hiawatha Lake, where the Blue Line intersects the Beeline corridor, will be reconstructed next year. And of course, our work next year focuses on the portion in the blue for Metro Beeline West construction. And here, I do want to highlight something that really sets the Beeline apart from other arterial BRT projects, which is the scope and scale of those substantial local improvements that are being constructed along with the Beeline. So as we look to Beeline West, we only have 15 remaining platforms to construct next year, and that's really focused at 8 intersections. We've got an operator restroom that will be constructed near the layover at Lake in France on the west end of the corridor. We're also putting in place some temporary customer boarding accommodations so that folks can board the bus there before redevelopment takes place in that area in the future. But there's an unprecedented level of local improvements planned to be constructed in 2024, thanks to an influx of funding through the RAISE program, through the regional solicitation, and the Highway Safety Improvement Program, all federal sources, which together with local match will bring over $23 million of additional construction to the project above and beyond just the transit scope. These safety and accessibility improvements are going to complement the transit investment in the Beeline and are really going to result in a great Lake Street corridor. And through 60% design in spring of this year, the project team fully anticipated that that construction could be completed within the Beeline schedule and allow for a December 2024 opening day for the Beeline. However, in working more recently with the city and the county to revise and review our construction phasing plans during final design, the project team identified some significant schedule risks to completing all of this work west of Hiawatha Avenue by December. Instead, opening the Beeline in June of 2025 will allow the project to be positioned for lower costs, for better value for both Metro Transit, the council, and our partners, and for more contractor interest and greater competition in this work as we put it out to bid later this year. So we also are looking at how we can deliver improvements to riders in phases between now and June of 2025. So we'll start to see the first of those improvements become available to customers later this year, and we plan to complete improvements along the Beeline steadily between now and June of 2025. So starting this winter, we'll have 27 new shelters in that east portion with heat and light ready for Route 21 customers. Into the spring of next year, we'll see the completion of the systems on those stations, so the real-time signs, emergency telephones, security cameras. By October of next year, we anticipate that the stations at Lake and Chicago, which are a critical connection point, would be complete and ready to support the transition of Route 21 operations from Chicago Lake Transit Center to Lake Street. In December of 2024, we anticipate all of that civil construction being completed on Lake Street. With that, those 15 additional new shelters would be complete with heat and light ready for our customers. But that winter of 2024 into 2025 is really critical for the delivery of all of the systems installation, the testing and integration. And I would encourage everyone to mark your calendars now for June 14th of 2025, when we will plan to open Metro B-Line service. So as we kind of zoom out and look to the other corridors that are next in the queue, we are going to be continuing to apply this critical lens even earlier in the process, working with our partners to identify how the many interrelated construction projects in each corridor need to come together to identify a comprehensive schedule for all those improvements. And one key application of this approach is on the G-Line corridor, which you'll be hearing about later in the information portion of the agenda today. On that line, as we begin a major phase of public engagement this fall around the station locations, we are making an early decision to do something we haven't done before, which is open a line in 2 distinct phases to best coordinate with other planned street construction. So as you can see here on the north portion of the corridor, the red portion on the map, Ramsey County is planning a significant amount of construction along Rice Street, beginning as soon as next year and continuing through 2027. St. Paul is also going to be reconstructing Robert Street in downtown in 2025 and 2026. We will be coordinating G-Line construction with both of these efforts, along with other efforts in the corridor. And once that construction is completed toward the end of 2027, we'd plan to begin G-Line service between Little Canada and downtown St. Paul in that red portion. On the south end, however, MnDOT is planning a project on Robert Street that won't be constructed until 2027 and 2028. So we've had significant conversations with MnDOT about coordination and have identified that the best approach for both projects is for G-Line construction south of St. Paul to shift to match MnDOT's schedule. So after that south end is completed, including the portion in coordination with MnDOT, all the way down into West St. Paul and the Dakota County Northern Service Center, after that's completed, we'd extend the G-Line service to the entirety of the Rice-Robert corridor. So with that, thank you for the time to provide this brief update, and I'll pause for any questions before yielding the floor back to Frank.
Questions or comments? Councilmember Chambliss?
All I can say is, wow. This is really exciting, just to think of the impact that this bus rapid transit is going to have, and the increased frequency in getting to destinations in areas where, it took a lot longer. I know Rice Street, I lived in St. Paul for several years, and that is an area that has a lot of businesses that can benefit from this, as well as the residents. So kudos, and it's exciting to see all of these different BRTs roll out.
Any additional questions or comments? Well, before you go, I'll just second, it's great. It's really great to see this vision of building up this sort of connected network, actually seeing it really come together. So, thank you. And now we have Frank turn.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber, committee members. I'm Frank Alarcon, manager of BRT projects in the Arterial BRT department at Metro Transit. Business item 2023-195 is to authorize the regional administrator to execute Amendment 1 to Contract 22I-046, Joint Powers and Cooperative Construction Agreement with Hennepin County to receive approximately $27 million in additional funds for construction of county-requested improvements along the Metro B-Line corridor. So this proposed amendment reflects the construction packaging approach being used for the B-Line that Katie described earlier, which includes the east package under construction today and the west package under construction in next year and into 2025. So in April 2023, Met Council and Hennepin County executed the initial 22I-046 agreement. This authorized the receipt of approximately $9 million from Hennepin County for construction of county-requested improvements in the east construction package under construction today. as well as the design work for the county requested improvements in the west construction package. Amendment number 1 really kind of adds on to that initial agreement by allowing the council to receive additional funds from Hennepin County for construction activities for the county requested improvements in the west construction package. At the time of the initial execution of 22I-046, construction costs for the west construction package were not included in that initial agreement due to continued design advancement of those county requested improvements and timing of Hennepin County's funding availability. As Katie mentioned earlier, the west construction package is expected to be advertised for bids in the fourth quarter of this year, and it will include a DBE goal. So in closing, business item 2023-195 is to authorize the regional administrator to execute amendment number 1 to contract 22I-046, joint powers and cooperative construction agreement with Hennepin County to receive an additional $27 million approximately in additional funds for construction of county requested improvements along the Metro B-Line corridor. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-195.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Carter. Is there any other discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Frank. All right, now we're on to business item 2023-196, and looks like you're being joined by Alicia of Valenti.
Yes, thank you, Chair Barber. And with your permission, I'd like to take a moment to introduce Alicia to the committee, with this being her first time presenting to Transportation Committee. Alicia joined the Arterial BRT department as a senior project coordinator at the end of July. In this role, Alicia leads design work for the B, F, and H line Arterial BRT projects. Alicia joins Metro Transit from SRF Consulting, where she worked on transit projects across the country for over 5 years, including Rochester, Minnesota's Link BRT and our very own F-Line BRT project. So she's bringing a lot of great transit and specifically BRT project experience to our organization. Alicia is a native of Florida and has lived in the Twin Cities since 2016 when she came here for graduate school in urban and regional planning. She lives in the Seward neighborhood of Minneapolis and is a year-round biker as well as a regular transit rider. So with that, I will hand it over to Alicia for the next business item.
Thank you for the great introduction. Welcome, Alicia.
Thank you, Madam Chair, council members. I'm Alicia Valenti, Senior Project Coordinator with Arterial BRT Department at Metro Transit. Business item number 2023-196 is regarding an amendment to contract 20P322 with Kimley Horn for construction administration services for the Metro B-Line project. Contract 20P322 with Kimley Horn includes engineering and construction administration services for the B-Line corridor. The contract was previously amended in March 2023 to include additional design and construction administration support for locally requested improvements along the corridor funded by project partners, as Katie and Frank have described. At the time of Amendment 1, construction administration costs for the West construction package were not included in the amendment due to continued design advancement of locally requested improvements and timing of Hennepin County funding availability. Amendment 2 accounts for additional construction administration costs resulting from the inclusion of locally requested improvements into the B-Line West construction package. Local funding will cover approximately 86% of the cost of this amendment, with the remainder provided by the B-Line project. This contract has a DBE goal of 16%. Kimley Horn has continually met this goal and will maintain its DBE utilization with this contract amendment. In closing, I request the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to award and execute Amendment 2 to contract 20P322 with Kimley Horn and Associates, Inc. for engineering and construction services for the Metro B-Line project. This amendment increases the contract value by $2,399,269 for a revised contract value not to exceed $13,834,168.
Good. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve 2023-196.
So moved.
Moved by
Second.
Councilmember Carter, second by Councilmember Morales. I almost called you Councilmember Diego. Sorry. Is there any other discussion? Seeing and hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you both. Have a good
Thank you.
evening. Next, we're on to business item 2023-209, which is a micro pilot project fair change. And we have Victoria Dan and Sheila Holbrook-White here to present.
Good evening, Madam Chair, council members. It's nice to be back and have the opportunity to introduce to you business item 2023-209, which is regarding the micro pilot fare change. My name is Victoria Dan. I'm a senior planner with Metro Transit Service Development, joined here by my colleague.
Sheila Holbrook-White. I work for MTS as a waiver program transportation manager, but serve on the PMT for this project.
So what is Metro Transit Micro? Micro is a 24-month test program of microtransit, which is an on-demand service, meaning that riders can request a ride when they need it and be picked up within a few minutes. It's app-enabled so that riders can use their smartphone app to get the most robust and supported service when they request their ride and book. It's also algorithm-powered so that riders are being matched in real time with vehicles for the most optimized rider experience as well as an optimized performance system-wide. And micro is also rideshare, which means that riders don't have to spend as much time waiting for their pickup because they can share their ride with others who are traveling to either similar destinations or destinations en route. So to date, we have had a few significant pilot milestones since we launched on September 10th of 2022. We expanded our zone in February of 2023, nearly doubling the size of the zone in North Minneapolis by bringing that northern boundary up from about Golden Valley Road and West Broadway up to 34th Avenue, and also east of I-94 over to the Mississippi. In the spring, we conducted a mid-pilot evaluation, which included, among other analyses, a rider survey that was conducted April 8th through the 23rd. And all of this information informed what our decision would be with this pilot after the initial 12-month pilot period. And we did conclude that we would extend this pilot into year 2. And you can see from the slide that we have since finished year 1 as of September 8th, 2023, and we anticipate year 2 will continue up through September 30th of 2024. So to provide you an overview of what we were aiming at with year 1 service, our overarching goals were to expand access to the high-frequency network, test the technology and service model, and to expand mobility choices, especially for low-income riders and communities of color. We learned a lot in our first year, and these are just 3 highlights. First, about 3% of rides on micro were ending at a bus stop or a BRT station. We also learned that about 2/3 of micro trips were at least 5 minutes faster than the fixed route alternative, which another way to say that would be 1/3 of micro trips were comparable to a fixed route alternative, or a fixed route alternative could have been faster. We also saw, generally speaking, that our operating costs were coming down steadily throughout the pilot period, where in August we saw the cost per passenger mile at $9.85 and per ride at $16.75, which puts us in the ballpark roughly of TransitLink general public dial-a-ride operating costs. And I'm going to hand it off to Sheila for operations.
Chair Barber and committee members, thank you for the opportunity to provide you with a snapshot of the pilot's performance in year 1 and to discuss some constraints that have emerged. In year 1, between September 10, 2022 and September 8, 2023, Micro provided 45,411 one-way passenger trips. Looking at trip destinations as shown in this pie, 1 in 3, or 36%, ended at a residence. An individual was going to a residence. 1 in 4, or 25% of completed trips, were to retail and to restaurants. The Cub on West Broadway is the most frequent destination of trips on Micro in North Minneapolis. While less frequent relative to other destinations, supportive residences and educational institutions represent roughly another 25% of all trip destinations. Supportive housing is that which at a minimum requires that residents meet certain eligibility requirements, and in this context, specifically an annual income that falls traditionally below or at established guidelines. So as Victoria was talking about our objectives, it's important to identify that these trips, which comprise 1 in 7 destinations, we're advancing one of those primary objectives, which is to support the mobility of low-income neighbors in North Minneapolis. Education and school trips included one of 42 public, private, and charter institutions in the service area, from early childhood programming to college coursework. In year one, with 45,511 one-way passenger trips completed, Micro customers waited on average 12.8 minutes between the time that they requested a trip on the app or called into the agent to make a reservation and the vehicle's arrival. Within the 5-mile service area, trips averaged about 1.8 miles and took approximately 8 minutes. It's a reminder, as Victoria pointed out, that this is a shared ride service. So some of that time is also spent picking up others who are also sharing a segment of a trip that an individual may be taking. Beginning in November 2022, we began using an in-app survey that asked riders to rate their experience on that vehicle. With approximately 10 months of data, the rider rating remains incredibly high at 4.8 out of 5 stars. We hear from customers that the driver is great, they're engaging, they're cheerful, the vehicles are clean, the trip is safe. Moving to our August operations performance chart on the right, overall utilization was an average of 4.3 per hour across all 7 days of the week and all hours of service, with, as Victoria pointed out, an unaudited cost of $16.76 per ride. The utilization rate per hour has sharply increased after that expansion. As you can see, that's been highlighted there in the green. And that utilization rate continues to grow incrementally, particularly on weekdays. The increase in utilization has critically been paired with a sharp increase in completed trips, which is a very positive outcome. It speaks to both service quantity and service quality. However, while that positive pairing of efficiency and increased completed trips is excellent news, Micro is experiencing some constraints that are not captured in that performance over time data. So in this slide, I'd like to call your attention to 2 colors in these stacked bar charts. The blue that marks the share of completed trips by month, and red, which symbolizes the proportion of capacity denial by month. So what's a capacity denial on an app-enabled service? So when a passenger requests a trip where the pickup cannot be completed in 30 minutes, the customer receives a message through the app that is a capacity denial. It says a seat is not available for that customer for that trip. What that capacity denial further signifies is that the combination of trips that are currently on board, those passengers on board today, right now, those that are in the queue waiting for their pickup, and those that now want a trip outstrips the supply. So as you can see in this overview of the first year, the share of red or capacity denials began to grow in April, with 6% of requests met with a capacity denial, a number that jumped to 11% by June and remained steady at 10% in August. In the first week of September, because we finished up September 1 to 8, to get you to that last week of year one. And particularly as public schools reopened, the capacity denial has jumped to 18%. So we've been wrestling with some really critical issues and questions. So how do we continue to provide a high-quality service and remain reliable, particularly when desire for the service may outstrip supply? And while that question is clearly a broad one for any transit service, I think it is particularly pertinent given our objective to expand mobility options for residents of color and those with low income, many of whom may not have another option and may not be able to find a reasonable fixed route alternative. So we're recommending a fare change as a strategy for managing the demand sufficiently such that we can continue to provide high-quality service when it's needed. Our recommendation is twofold: that we increase the current fare that micro customers pay from a local fare of $2 or $2.50 rush to an express fare. That increase acknowledges the premium service quality of micro coming to the door, taking you directly to your destination in a shared ride context, and also aligns fares with comparable services operated by suburban providers. And concurrently, shielding low-income riders from the fare increase, particularly those without a reasonable fixed route alternative. So individuals using a transit assistance pass, a student pass, showing a Metro Mobility ID card, or who are otherwise eligible for non-rush reduced fares are exempted from that fare increase. Our fare change recommendation builds on current data, what we know, and some information we do not know. Approximately 1 in 4 micro customers currently are paying the full fare. That's represented in the stacked chart by that goldenrod color. Through the increase in fare, we seek to incentivize those customers to opt for a fixed route solution for which a local fare is charged, rather than paying the higher cost for a micro trip. That full fare customer who opts for a less expensive fixed route reduces demand on micro and therefore decreases the share of capacity denials across the system. Individuals using free or discounted fare media, for example, through the TAP program, Transit Assistance Program, those attending Minneapolis public schools, or those otherwise subsidized by partners, are not subject to this fare change. And that's an exemption that we feel stays in line with the pilot's objectives. There is an important caveat to the data that we are sharing. While we are able to provide information on the share of full and reduced fares paid when customers use a go-to card, our data does not capture fares paid for by those who pay cash, use a ticket, a token, or the mobile ticketing app. So we don't know how and when they pay. So to that end, let's go to our next slide. Recognizing that our understanding of who pays fares in cash, tokens, and tickets is not complete, and that a fare change might be assumed to be universal throughout this service area, which it is not as we propose, we believe that this fare change is complex, and our communication of these changes must be robust, it must be thorough, and it must be active. To that end, we would propose that this fare increase would begin no earlier than November 1st of 2023, and that's timing to allow for that critical information, messaging, and engagement. Upon authorization, we will flesh out our initial communication plan, specifically defining and refining messages, when we will message, and what social media we will use. But I would argue critically the next two. We want to leverage our partnerships with community anchors, such as educational and healthcare institutions and community organizations, in order to ensure that accurate information is being shared with current and potential customers, and to coordinate additional outreach to individuals and families eligible for TAP, but who are not yet enrolled. Recognizing that those who are using TAP are eligible for that local fare. And again, using community gatherings when we can to assist individuals by helping them understand how micro works and what those fare changes may mean to them. Now, a key element to that fare change is the introduction of a substantive improvement to the app that Victoria will outline as she begins our year 2 overview. Victoria?
Thank you, Sheila. So in addition to the proposed fare increase for the micropilot, we are also planning on a couple of key improvements for year 2 that will improve both our understanding of micro and the rider experience interacting with the app and the service. So the first is making the micro app more robust for multimodal trip discovery, which essentially means that when a rider is looking for a micro trip, they can also find next to their micro offer a fixed route alternative that may be arriving soon according to our real-time fixed route schedule data. So this will help all riders across the board by providing them with a transparent option upfront about whether or not they have a fixed route option available and a micro option available. And that really will help riders choose which mode is the right choice for that trip. And further, combined with the fare increase, particularly for riders who are full fare paying riders, this will further provide them with information about the cost benefit of either taking the micro trip at full express fare or the local fixed route alternative at full local fare. The other improvement that we will be deploying in year 2 is more consistent and regular, robust in-app surveying to begin asking riders on a trip-by-trip basis whether or not they intend to connect to or from a fixed route. This is something that we did not have as robust data in year 1 to collect transfer information on, but we hope that with the survey, we'll be able to connect ride data specifically to transfer data moving forward, bettering our understanding of the interaction between micro and our fixed route network. More broadly speaking, we are also embarking on further exploration of microtransit projects in the region. We are specifically exploring potential options for supplementing mobility in low-density areas with some form of microtransit. This effort will include needing to evaluate pilot areas centered on transit centers or stations, as well as evaluating what the operational capacity is to implement each one of those zones. So looking into sort of the near term, 2024, 2025, we'll need to prioritize what exactly those locations would be. And then looking out even more broadly, we'll need to coordinate with regional providers who in the Twin Cities are providing their own form of microtransit in their communities. And part of that will be channeled through the TPP work plan study scheduled for 2025-2026, which among other things will also be looking at standardizing and aligning fare on microtransit. As we saw earlier in a previous slide, there's quite some variability in those fare ranges. That brings me full circle back to our proposed action for 2023-209 that the Metropolitan Council authorize an increase of Metro Transit micro pilot fare from local to express fares.
Great, thank you. Questions or comments? Councilmember Tyrone Carter.
Yeah, I had a question. I was just trying to understand, what's the percentage of disabled people that utilize your service?
We don't have a direct, we're not exactly clear on that percentage. However, I will say, and something we didn't talk about directly during our presentation, is that we do now have the identification of who those Metro Mobility customers are in the service area. And part of our outreach during the communication of the change, if authorized, would be to make sure that they're aware they can use micro, what that cost will be. I do know, and we've had some anecdotal information from Metro Mobility customers who are using micro today, who talk about how it's really life-changing and transformative, that they aren't having to make reservations a day or two in advance, that they go shopping when the need strikes, and when one of our most passionate passengers is a older adult who was on Metro Mobility with 2 grandkids living with her. And she says that when the need strikes for cookies, they just get on the micro and they go to Cub. And she's a fantastic advocate for the flexibility it now provides her in a way that she didn't have before.
Yeah, it sounds like a wonderful program. I just had a question too. So the micro, it's basically a minibus.
It's an accessible ADA vehicle that is sort of, it's structured very much like it's a small bus, but it is an accessible vehicle.
Okay, and typically it's ride sharing, so there are going to be other people. And what's the capacity for?
About 42% of our rides are shared among multiple passengers. And what is our capacity with?
Per vehicle. I want to say it's about 10 seats plus 2 wheelchair slots.
Positions.
And
Yeah.
positions. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I know in the past, some people have gotten stranded from time to time, and we've gotten complaints about that. And this seems like another avenue and kind of relieves steam pressure on the
Exactly.
the problem. So, yeah, those are all my questions. I think it's a wonderful program, and I hope it continues in the same vein.
Great. Additional questions or comments? Councilmember Tony Carter.
Thank you. It's fascinating to see the variety of offerings and how our ability to test and evaluate and determine what next steps should be taken is just really admirable. I love the concept. I also want to ask a question about the assessment of capacity denials being up and the need to change the fare so as to manage to that capacity build. I'm assuming that the goal is to keep that time down so that we are able to respond within that average period of time, 12.8 minutes or so, which is incredible. I can make a cookie run, and I certainly sympathize with that. At the same time, there are a couple of things that strike me. I realize this is a one-year pilot, and maybe everybody's more attuned than I have been to this pilot coming to an end and then new policy for fares in an upcoming year. Because it seems to me like that's really quick to make a change to the fares in November with the notification to people happening only after today. Now, that's just me. And, I don't now know how those folks who have been using this would feel about that. What I do know is that it will make a difference in some budgets, could make a substantial difference in some budgets, could actually, instead of increasing capacity, serve to decrease demand. I'm not really sure the extent to which it will. But I would ask the question, and this is not to be critical, but just really because it comes to me, have we assessed whether an increase in actual wait time could be preferable to an increase in fare, and the extent to which that might help families or individuals to manage their budgets?
Madam Chair, council members, thank you for that question.
I know bigger is always better, but just,
We indeed have seen our wait times increase, and that is not universally a bad thing. If your wait times are very short, it might signify an oversupply compared to the amount of demand on the service. And after we expanded our service area, we saw those things start to come closer in line with each other. But as we've been telling this story today, we're now at a point where our wait times have been going up to a point where we do start to see those denials. So the denials are a function of those longer wait times, of the lack of additional capacity to serve those rides within 30 minutes. So there are times of day where riders are being offered a trip within 20 minutes, within 25 minutes. And when it gets beyond 30 is when that denial happens.
well, that's what denial means. It's actually the rider denying pickup, or is it the other way around?
The other way around,
Okay.
where the software is unable
Saying
to
we don't have
deliver
time
that
for you.
trip. Right,
Gotcha.
right. And since this is an on-demand service, we're more or less designing this to be within that 30-minute marker. Kind of beyond that, you start to get into more schedule ahead service, which starts to look a little bit more like our existing dollar ride services. I had one more thought, but
I do.
Sheila.
Councilmember, Chair Barber and council members, do you mind if I go back to the PowerPoint for a second? Because I
No,
want to
thank
respond to
you.
your
I
question.
appreciate that.
La, la, la. Here we go.
I'm sure I missed it. I couldn't track it all.
No. I think you're asking brilliant questions, by the way. So I think one of the other things I want to highlight here is we look at that April through September period. So we highlighted blue is completed trips. Red is those capacity denials where essentially the system is saying no more space relative to supply. What we also start to see is a creeping number of customer cancellations where the customer says, oh, when we're getting up into the 20, 25 minutes for waiting, I'm just canceling, I'm walking. Or we see the person receiving what we call a proposal that says, oh, it'll take us about 25 minutes to get to you. And the customer says, I don't want the trip, too long. That's our customer refusal. We're starting to see that creep up as wait times continue to increase. And then there's that, one of the other defining markers is the customer no-show, where after, let's say you've been waiting 28 minutes, it's supposed to be coming, you've gotten the trip, you just decide, oh, no way, I'm just walking. I'm just not gonna do this today. Maybe I'm gonna go get fixed route instead. So I think that your point about trying to balance that demand, it does impact the capacity denial that a customer may receive, but it also impacts that number of people who cancel. So resources go out, a trip is committed, and then the customer says, I'm not gonna take it. Which may mean Victoria doesn't get a trip because at the time there was nothing there. And so I think one of the things we're seeing is this interplay between those and trying to kind of manage the supply. So we do have a high quality trip.
That's very, very helpful, and thank you for your responses. Can I extend briefly? And so the fare is going up for everyone. And I'm asking that because I got lost when you explained that for those discounted fares, it would not go up. I wasn't sure if that meant they would continue to pay the previous fare or if it meant that they would pay the lower off-peak fare.
Chair Barber and committee members, with the fare increase, let's go back if we can to one more.
Forgive me, it's just all a lot of spaghetti for me. I appreciate your untangling.
So currently, the micro customer pays a local fare, so $2 non-peak, $2.50 peak. If the express fare recommendation is accepted, those individuals that are receiving TAP, so they get the lower reduced cost, they will remain at $2 and $2.50. Their fare will not go up. It's only those that are currently paying full fare, that goldenrod group, that will pay the $3.25 express rate. Thank you, Adam.
Madam Chair, if I can interject, the TAP fare is actually $1
Oh, thank you.
all the
Adam, my
time,
pleasure. Oh, thank you.
everywhere. So that's a significant difference from what they're at today. And that's a key component to whether they're using the TAP card, or if you're a Minneapolis public school, high school student, you'll have a free pass through there. And so you notice in that pie chart, there's a lot of students going to high school along with the other places. So there's the TAP card, the school pass, and then the express fare is an existing fare set, so it is a little bit more, but you have a 2.5-hour transfer, and there's a lot of other benefits. So when we think about this service as kind of a premium service over a fixed route, that's part of the rationale. We're looking across the peer providers to say, okay, we're in about the right ballpark compared to everyone else. And the addition of this app on the phone that will help guide customers to, would you consider taking C-Line instead of waiting for this trip, so we can guide people to other options that might even be better than what they're thinking about with micro.
But you're protecting those current reduced fares.
Exactly.
Whatever the fare currently is, it is.
Correct.
Thank you. This is, just very well designed. I appreciate your thoughtfulness and
Well, and Chair
response.
Barber and committee members, I apologize for confusing you on TAP. And so I do think the other point you raised, Commissioner, or Committee Member Carter, is the issue about other folks may not be aware of. And that's part of that idea about doing that outreach into communities. So as you can see, 55% of those we surveyed last spring identified that they are likely eligible for TAP, but they may not be enrolled. And so part of our communication strategy would be to do some specific outreach to ensure that they are enrolled. And so they are paying as Mr. Harrington just identified, that dollar rather than something different or higher.
Thank you.
Councilmember Chambliss.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, this is a very interesting presentation, and I did see on the table on page 13 in the back, there was a board that said $1 probably at one of those community events. I do have a question. Is it just high school students that have free fares? Or are there other individuals that get free fare versus the dollar fare?
Madam Chair, Council Member, in Minneapolis, we provide service to all the Minneapolis high schools. Other schools can buy their own student pass plans, but we have an agreement with Minneapolis Public Schools to provide service for all their high school students, so 9 through 12.
So just high school is free. Everybody else, that would be the next tier of payment would be the $1 for the TAP, or the other individuals that qualify for the $1 fare.
Correct, unless their parents or that particular school did buy into the student pass program individually, which is possible.
Oh, okay, so, all right, so that could be part of like their high school student fees or something, or a monthly
I'm
payment that
thinking
the
of middle
parents pay?
school, elementary school, because all the high school students are covered. It's really the middle school and then elementary school, I think, is what you're getting at, is who's left that could take advantage of a student pass.
Okay, and so their parents would have an option of buying a student pass for their child in elementary or middle school?
Right.
Okay. And then, Chair, if I might, okay, so I was really happy to see on page 6 where you have that pie chart that there were many users that 10% were utilizing the services to get to school, education in schools, so that was great. And then 18% combined were going to jobs, education, or resources, which is great. And then I did have a question about the supportive residences. What type of residences are those that would be supportive? Is that daycare or?
Chair Barber and committee members, that reference is to, for example, there are parts of Heritage Park, for example, in the service area for which a person has to meet a certain income eligibility, which is about 50% of the average market rate, so pretty low income, in order to qualify for supported and subsidized housing. And we consider that to be supportive residence. It also covers those residences in the community that may have an eligibility requirement, as well as the person has to have a particular diagnosis, perhaps a disability, a behavioral health disorder, or a chemical health disorder. So it's a combination of all of those that support somebody who has a low income with additional services and supports. And there are a number of them in the community.
Okay. I probably will have to talk to you afterwards because I probably have a lot of in-depth questions about, how a neighborhood would qualify for those supports, but that we can take offline, I guess.
Absolutely.
And then, Chair, if I might, one other question I have is on page 10, where the chart is showing since inception to September 2023 of the pilot. I'm very interested in seeing what year 2 is going to look like in the wintertime because of people who may not have been aware of the service in the colder months, because I'm thinking, just kind of a theory, that people may choose in year 2, if they are aware that they don't have to go out in 20 below weather, that there's a microtransit option that they would qualify for that they didn't know in September 2022. So that our capacity and cancellations or customer refusal could be more of a challenge once they do know about the service. So it's good that this is a pilot and we're watching all of those numbers. And then lastly, if I may, the survey, I'm sure that's going to include quality of life type questions. How does it impact your quality of life to have access to this service, which will either get you within your neighborhood in a short distance or get you to another public transit to connect to? So can you tell me about what the goals are in addition for the survey related to quality of life, or what are you trying to glean from that besides that?
Madam Chair, council members, the survey from this past spring really focused in on our learning who our riders were that are using the service and trying to better understand how and for what purpose riders were using the service, what kinds of, in addition to what destinations they were going to, which we could track through the service data, but for what purpose? Is it a trip to the grocery store, maybe a work trip, or is it an errand? That kind of question asking. We have more or less sort of left it to riders to tell us about those certain quality of life factors. What other value does the service bring to them? And certainly, as we look out to year 2 and begin to maybe reassess and evaluate our goals now that we know more after year 1, perhaps questions related to quality of life ought to be considered for maybe a next round of surveying or engagement. Certainly, those types of questions are things that we hear anecdotally. So looking forward to trying to understand that in a more kind of systematic way would be beneficial.
Wonderful, thank you.
Councilmember Carter, Tony.
Oh, this is an oh, by the way, and I realized it as I was beginning to ask it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Not about microtransit, but more about those student passes, and I am wondering to what extent our schools, our districts adopt the student pass. So if that needs a response later, and specifically, of course, because St. Paul students are now on the yellow bus, I am wondering if they have chosen to continue the student pass for access to transit after school.
Well, Madam Chair, Council Member, it is a longer conversation, and certainly we've been working with St. Paul quite a while. We do have several schools, high schools with St. Paul Public Schools that we provide passes for. They made a couple changes this current year to move back to yellow school bus, and so we continue to work with them. They've been a very good partner in trying to figure out the logistics on what works and what doesn't, but I'm happy to come back another time to talk about it.
I'd appreciate that, or it might just be an offline.
All right, additional questions or comments? Councilmember Morales.
Just had one question in regards to the algorithm. Does it prioritize low-income users or not at all?
Thank you for that question, Madam Chair, council members. That is something that we have not pursued up to this point with the app. We understand that there are ways with the behind-the-scenes software to specify certain types of users and perhaps give them priority for capacity on micro. We have asked very similar questions of our software vendor. That is something that we have not specifically asked, with regard to prioritizing low-income riders, but it's certainly a question that we can follow up with.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions or comments? All right, I've got a couple. So one question kind of popped into my mind. We were talking about how we can't collect the data off the mobile app on different fares that are being paid and some of that. I know we're doing work on the Metro Transit app as well, because the idea is to be able to look on and say, I can go this way or that way. So my question, and I might go to General Manager as well, is there a plan to actually integrate these two apps better rather than have two different apps?
Chair Barber, I'll
Made
just
everyone
share
quiet
that. I think
again.
it's a good question, and that's something we can take back to our staff who lead the transit app and look at.
Okay.
Unless you-
That's good to hear, especially as we're going to be, part of one of the things we've been charged with from the legislature is really building out more microtransit. And if you can put on, maybe you do need to get, to 15 minutes to get cookies, but, maybe it's like, no, we can do that later and you can find a different option. But it's the easier we make it for people, it makes it just that they're more likely to use. And then also just looking, also probably not for you guys, but for the general manager, is the pace and timing, looking at, out over 2-3 years. I think there is somewhat of an expectation that we do, at least figure out some of the target areas. So.
Yeah, Chair Barber, council members, I think slide 15 in here was a nice overview of some of the considerations that we're looking at when considering what it looks like to expand microtransit. But to your point, it was one of the items in the transportation omnibus for the new sales tax. And so it's definitely something we're looking at. And that's part of why extending this pilot is so valuable, so we can continue to learn and think about where it makes sense to go next. So, yeah.
Very good, thank you. And I think it seems like we've learned a lot, so it's good timing for all of this. Any additional questions or comments? All right, seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-209.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Next, we're on to business item 2023-222, a same week item to close out of master operations funding agreements for transitway service, and we have Steve True here for this one and our next one. Welcome.
Chair and council members, I'm Steve True, Senior Manager of Finance for Metro Transit. And what we have is business item 2023-222. It is to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Hennepin, Ramsey, and Anoka counties for the termination and closeout of master funding operations agreement for the transitways for Metro Blue Line, Metro Green Line, and North Star commuter rails. In March of 2018, the parties executed a master funding operating agreement for those three transitway services. Last year, in 2023, session law required that the council impose a regional transportation sales tax. Per the session, we were required that by September 30th, 2023, a political subdivision must pay to the Metropolitan Council all outstanding obligations through September 30th, 2023, under the terms of the existing master operating funding agreement. As of October 2023, all agreements between the Metropolitan Council and the parties under the executed master funding agreement will be terminated. The actual net operating costs will not be known until sometime after September 30th, 2023. And the purpose of this MOU will allow the parties to memorialize the understanding about how the final payments and reconciliations under the master operations funding agreement will be made and the agreements closed out. What we're asking is the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to enter into a memorandum of understanding with Hennepin, Ramsey, and Anoka counties for the termination and closeout of the master operating funding agreements for those three lines.
Thank you. Are there any questions from Councilmember Morales?
Have all counties paid money that's owed?
I think there's still some that are owed for the third quarter of this year, but they were current as of September 1st.
Chair Barber, council members, I think there is some outstanding question about North Star service and what the county of Anoka owes. So we can provide additional information on that if desired.
Thank you.
Additional questions or comments? Yes, the question I was going to ask, so thank you. All right, actually, before I, so part of the agreement is having everything paid. So would that, I guess maybe I don't know the right question to ask. What would next steps be then?
Chair Barber, council members, I think this action tonight is really, kind of implementing what's already in legislation. I think the legislation's clear about the expectations that counties pay what they owe under the existing master operations funding agreement. So any steps beyond that, I think, yeah, we will need to discuss further with.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. All right, so with that, now we can, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-222, same week. Moved by Councilmember Tony Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Tyrone Carter. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. And the motion carries. Now we're on to business item 2023-224, which is the Orange Line operating grant agreements. I'll turn it back to Steve.
Chairman and council members, this is business item 2023-224, which is to authorize a regional administrator to negotiate and execute a final operating agreement for Metro Orange Line between Hennepin County and Dakota County. The Metro Orange Line began operations in December of 2021. Council staff has been in negotiations with county staffs from Hennepin and Dakota County to establish the operating funding agreement for the Orange Line. The 2023 session law requires the council to impose a regional transportation sales and use tax per the 2023 session law. A political subdivision must pay to the council 50% of net operating costs between December 1st of 2021 through September 30th of 2023 for each of the guideways that began service after December 1st. The Metro Orange Line final operating grant agreements with Hennepin and Dakota counties will include language on how to make the final payments and reconciliations under the operating grants through September 30th, 2023. And then these can be closed out. The motion that we're asking for is the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute final operating grant agreements for the Metro Orange Line for the period December 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2023 with Hennepin and Dakota counties.
Good, thank you. Questions or comments from council members? All right, seeing and hearing none, I'd entertain a motion to approve business item 2023-224.
So moved.
Moved by Councilmember Morales. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Councilmember Chambliss. Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, Steve. Now we're on to our final business item for the evening, which is business item 2023-225, a joint item on the Transit Rider Investment Program resolution. We have Leah Palmer here.
Good evening, Councilmember Barber and council members. My name is Leah Palmer, and I am currently the interim manager for the Transit Rider Investment Program. Tonight we are asking the council to comply with the legislature's directives in the Transit Rider Investment Program that the Metropolitan Council first adopt Resolution 2023-19 and adopt the Transit Rider Investment Program policy. So the statute that was just passed in May of 2023 of this year requires the council to take two actions. The first is to adopt that resolution, and what that resolution does is it lays out the fine schedule for the administrative citations. We have done work to see what other agencies are doing and analyzing what would be appropriate for us. So you can see that the first violation begins at $35, and that is set by statute, and there are alternatives to payment that are listed there. The second violation goes up by $20 to $55. The third violation goes up by another $20 to $75, and a person may be prohibited from accessing transit for up to 60 days. And the fourth and any subsequent violations go up by $25 to $100, and including an enhanced penalty possible of prohibition from accessing transit for 120 days. There are other agencies across the United States that do prohibit people from accessing transit if they are consistent fare evaders. So we feel that this is grounded in some good research there. There is always the option for people who have financial hardship to apply for a TAP program or other programs that may apply for the reduced fare. So we definitely are looking to be inclusive, and we want to understand and meet our riders where they're at. You know, ticketing someone for fare evasion, we're not out there to be punitive, we're out there to really help. And we're trying to understand what are the barriers for people riding, why are they not paying fares? So to the degree that we can work with people and gather that information and find solutions, that's really what we're after. So the second part that the legislation requires that Metropolitan Council do is to adopt the Transit Rider Investment Program policy. So the policy is, I think it's pretty clear. It basically states what the statute states, which is that the council established this program, that we are committed to providing safe and reliable public transportation. And so part of that is to establish this program that includes personnel who will check fares, be able to write those administrative citations, but also support and assist customers and riders, as well as those who may be experiencing homelessness, those who may need social services. They can help provide those referrals to those individuals. And we are holding ourselves accountable in a number of ways, but not the least of which, of course, is a report back to the legislature on the 15th of February of every year. So with that, I'm asking for approval of business item 2023-225JT, that the Metropolitan Council comply with the legislature's directives in the Transit Rider Investment Program to adopt Resolution 2023-19 and adopt the Transit Rider Investment Program policy.
Very good, thank you, Leah. Questions or comments from council members?
I'm definitely in support of this resolution. I think it provides order on our light rail and also an expectation for how our business is to be conducted. I believe that this resolution makes sense in terms of how we are administrating the non-compliance to fares, and also allows for us to put people first. So therefore, I plan to vote for this motion, and I would like to make a motion to approve it.
Motion's been made. Is there a second?
Second.
There's a second by Councilmember Morales. Just a quick comment before we vote. I do want to thank you for coming to the committee of the whole and talking with the whole council about all of this ahead of time. I think, gave opportunity for a lot of people to ask a lot of questions, think about it, kind of get everyone in the same space of how we're going to proceed. So with that, is there any other discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, nay, and the motion carries. Thank you, Leah. All right, we are now on to, I think all of our, I know you love to hear me talk at council meetings, but I think all of these should probably go non-consent to the full council unless there's any disagreement. Okay. All right. Now we're on to information. So we have the Metro G Line Draft Quarter Plan, and we have Laura Gredeman and Kyle O'Donnell Burrows here to present. Welcome.
Good afternoon, Chair Barber, committee members. My name is Kyle O'Donnell Burrows. I use he, him pronouns, and I am here today to support Laura Gredeman, who will be delivering this information item.
Chair Barber, council members, I'm Laura Gredeman, and I'm a planner on the Arterial BRT team. And this afternoon, I have an info item about the G-Line Draft Corridor Plan release. The G-Line will be the 7th line in the Arterial BRT network. It links together two important transit spines in the East Metro, the Route 62 and the Route 68, to create a north-south transit corridor, which will have connections to many other planned and existing Metro lines. The G-Line will provide fast, frequent, and all-day service from Little Canada to West St. Paul. The 11.5-mile G-Line corridor is expected to mostly replace Route 62 and Route 68 within that corridor. The G-Line will serve a number of destinations along the corridor, including the state capitol, downtown St. Paul, and the Dakota County Northern Service Center. In the March pick, the average daily ridership was just over 4,000 riders on average weekdays. And it is a corridor that's going to serve a lot of different residents, a high population of BIPOC residents. Corridors are households without access to a car or with a lower median household income. Within the G-Line corridor, currently today, the Route 62 is part of the Fare Free pilot. The G-Line project schedule, we're currently within the planning phase. Today is the kickoff of the draft corridor plan comment period. The 6-week engagement period begins today and will end on November 6th. So during this time, we'll be out in the community looking for feedback on our proposed station and platform locations. In spring of 2024, we'll be coming to the council with an action to authorize the release of the recommended corridor plan. And then we'll be returning to the council again in the summer of 2024 with an action to release the final corridor plan. One of the goals of identifying the F, G, and H lines in the Network Next process in 2021 was to really let our partners know that we would be planning BRT in the corridor and give them a heads up if they wanted to start thinking about coordinated projects. So throughout the G-Line corridor, we really have quite a few to work with. We're working closely with the City of St. Paul, Ramsey County, and MnDOT to make sure that our stations and platforms are being considered when they're working on their layouts. The draft corridor plan, which is being released today, includes both our proposed station and platform locations. I think this graphic does a good job of showing kind of the relationship between those two, where the station is the intersection where the bus stops, and then the platforms are where people are actually getting on and off the bus. The draft corridor plan includes a lot of other information as to how we came to our proposals for the G-Line. Each station location that we're proposing for the G-Line includes an aerial image, a list of destinations that will be served by the G-Line, any coordinated projects at the intersection, other transportation access, and impacts to on-street parking. We also outlined the other station and platform locations that we considered. Additionally, some stations will include a proposed station plan, which is really a concept drawing of what the street will look like once the G-Line opens. However, because so much of the corridor is within a coordinated project and we don't know what the layout will look ultimately for those, we're not including those for every station. As the Arterial BRT team, continue to go out to the community and hear feedback on different draft corridor plans, we've noticed a couple of themes that we're kind of thinking about now as the draft corridor plan for the G-Line is being released. The first piece is the station spacing, then the on-street parking impacts, and finally the local service plan. For the G-Line, the stations are spaced about 0.4 miles apart on average, which is right where we want to be for Arterial BRT. For the G-Line, we have very limited on-street parking impacts, partially because so many of the coordinated projects are addressing parking within their own projects, and also parts of the line and corridor just simply don't have any on-street parking. As far as the local service plan, we do have kind of a high-level outline of that in the G-Line draft corridor plan. However, that will continue to be finalized as we get closer to the opening day. The draft corridor plan public engagement period begins today, will go until November 6th. So this is a really important time for the community to be able to share their thoughts about our proposals. We have also been out on the corridor the last couple of months raising awareness and just letting people know that the G-Line will be coming their way as well. So finally, this slide has a number of, just a highlight of some of the engagement strategies that we're doing for the G-Line. We really have, our main goal with public engagement is to make sure that everyone in the corridor is aware that the G-Line is coming, and that they've been given an opportunity to share their feedback with us. As part of our public engagement strategy, we're also working closely with our partners at MnDOT, Ramsey County, and the City of St. Paul as they're doing their coordinated project engagement as well. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
Very good. Thank you, Laura. Questions or comments from council members? Councilmember Tyrone Carter.
I'd just like to say, I like the public engagement aspect. Seems like it's pretty well thought out, and I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Councilmember Tony Carter.
So thank you. It took a while to get this project on board with the Met Council, and it's great to see it moving forward. I'm wondering whether there are any particular meetings planned. I know you'll do kiosking and pop-ups. Are there any particular community engagement or open house meetings that I didn't see listed?
We do have a virtual open house planned for October 10th. And we're also coordinating with neighborhood groups and our TAC agencies along the corridor as well to create opportunities for us to go and meet with those groups as well.
Great. Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments? It's just great to see some of these projects that are coming on the east side, and we hear about it a lot. I feel like, Commissioner Mary Jo McGuire is jumping up and down and cheering somewhere right now because we're seeing this moving ahead, because we had lots of conversations about how do we balance some of these things out. So it's very good. It's very nice to see. Councilmember Vento.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Little Canada used to be part of the district that I represented prior to the redistricting and the reassignments. And I know that community is really interested. I'd encourage you to connect with the city. They have some particular goals there along with this project. And they're very, very committed to this. And they want to coordinate as much as possible. Chai Lee is their new council rep. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Anything final? Very good. Thank you. We look forward to hearing more. All right. Now we're on to our final information item, which is the zero emission bus transition plan. And it's an annual report, and we have Carrie Desmond here to present. Oh, and Jeremiah Ryder.
Good afternoon, council members. My name is Carrie Desmond. I'm the manager of electric bus infrastructure for Metro Transit and use she, her pronouns.
Good afternoon, Chair and committee members. My name is Jeremiah Ryder. I'm the Assistant Director of Bus Maintenance.
So I'll give you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today, a little bit of background about the transition plan itself, focus on our key performance indicators, and then a few project updates at the end. And just to kind of ground us in what we're talking about, we'll do a little refresher here on the guiding principles of the transition plan. So these really act as our policy framework and allow us to make consistent decision making as we're moving forward with the transition plan. So the first one we look at is technical viability, making sure that as we're implementing this new technology, it's a good fit for the service where we're putting it there and we can provide reliable service to the customers. From there, we look at equity and environmental justice. So two pieces here. One, how we prioritize where electric buses are deployed next, because this transition is going to take time, but also a consistent educational and outreach component. And that's part of actually what we're kicking off here today with this commitment in the transition plan to do an annual update to the Transportation Committee as well as to interested stakeholders, both internally and externally. And then finally, looking at the fiscal impact. So recognizing there is a premium both on the capital and the operating cost in some instances here. So making sure we're being prudent in our decision making. So there's a series of key performance indicators we're going to walk through here today. We'll explain what they are and what the results are to date and kind of what we're learning from them. But first, just want to show these metrics really align with the guiding principles we just talked about, so helping us assess how we're doing relative to that policy framework we created. So I'm going to turn it over to Jeremiah to go through the first few.
Yeah, so fleet mileage, what's being measured, the total number of miles driven by zero-emission buses each year. How it's measured, the total odometer miles of the zero-emission buses. Why it's important, as Metro Transit makes progress towards transitioning its fleet to zero-emissions buses, the total number of fleet miles driven by zero-emission buses will increase. Comparing annual vehicle mileage for ZEBs will help depict how they perform in our service environment. In this slide here, you can see the projected miles, scheduled miles, and we reached in 2022 a 90% rating for that. Aside from 2021, when the ZEBs were out of service for most of the year, the percentage of scheduled miles driven by ZEBs has steadily increased. In 2022, the fleet of 8 buses drove 175,300 miles. The ZEB range limitations were expected, but is still a challenge. In 2022, the average ZEB traveled 41% less miles than a light diesel. The zero-emission bus, ZEB, 21,914 miles, and the diesel, 36,868. In this slide, it shows fewer miles driven by the ZEBs compared to the diesel buses. I was largely covered in my talking points in the previous slide. And bus reliability, what's being measured? Mean, the average distance between chargeable road calls. A chargeable road call are defined as an instance when a bus requires unplanned maintenance attention while in service. How is it being measured? The number of miles traveled divided by the number of chargeable road calls. Why is this important? The bus reliability metrics will help Metro Transit evaluate how often the bus breaks down while in service to assess the impact of zero emissions buses have on service reliability and customer experience. As you can see here in the chart, the reliability has increased nearly 4 times since 2019 to 2022. The ZEB mean distance between chargeable road calls is still below the BRT system average. For 2021, we have a service data for 90 days that cannot be predicted for what happened when we were unable to continue revenue service. 2022 BRTs ran 8,862 miles for the mean distance between chargeable road calls, and the battery electrics were 4,870 miles.
So we'll transition into some of our environmental metrics here. So the first one's looking at the environmental impact. What are the greenhouse gas emission reductions compared to a comparable diesel fleet? And to measure this, we're using a nationally recognized tool put out by Argonne National Labs, and it looks at the full well-to-wheel. So what are those emission reductions from the generation of the fuel, comparing diesel to the electricity being produced, and then also out on route in the community where they're operating. So this helps us understand those community benefits that we're delivering to the region. The other thing to keep in mind here, and we talk about this often when we're talking about the zero emission bus transition plan, is it's one piece of a broader strategy. Transit in itself is sustainable. And so when we think about what our environmental impact is, we also have to think about it in collaboration with all these other initiatives we're talking about, things like Arterial BRT that we heard about earlier today that help increase our ridership and get folks making that choice where they're able to from single occupancy vehicles onto our transit services. So this slide's just showing kind of where buses in the state of Minnesota fit into the transportation emissions landscape. So looking at our deployment so far, since we launched C-Line in mid-2019, we've reduced our GHG emissions by 370 metric tons of carbon dioxide equivalents. Maybe not your household unit of measure, so a few comparisons of what that equates to: a little over 36,000 gallons of diesel avoided, or the equivalent of a little over 70 homes' typical electricity use in a year. The other metric we look at in this space is equity and environmental justice, and this was something that was central to our community engagement efforts during developing the plan, asking the community, how should we prioritize where these buses go? So this metric helps us understand how are we doing against that commitment we made when co-creating this method with the community. So just a refresher on how we came up with this. We took 7 different statistics that are in the Council's equity considerations data set that relate to transitioning to zero emission buses. And we asked the community to rank them. How should we use those to prioritize? And then we laid that out on a census tract level of the region. So the pink areas are the areas that are kind of the highest ranking based on that community feedback. So when we look at the C-Line running through North Minneapolis, it is primarily in one of those high equity and environmental justice zones. So to date, 100% of our deployments have been in those high priority zones, but this will become more interesting in future years as we start deploying electric buses in regular route service and sprinkling them around the region to see how we're doing. Another metric we look at is the energy cost per mile. So how much is it costing us for diesel or electricity to move these buses a mile down the road? And this helps us understand our operating costs and for budgeting purposes. So far, the green line here is what we're seeing for the electric buses, the blue for the diesel. We are seeing higher energy cost on a per mile basis for the electric buses compared to diesel. This is a key area of study for the team as we move forward to partner with Excel on what are our opportunities to reduce this. One thing I will say about it is diesel is more volatile, so from a budget predictability standpoint or budgeting standpoint, it perhaps is a little easier to budget for the electric bus cost on that operating cost, but it is currently costing us more. I've got 2 metrics left for you here. The first one is looking at infrastructure availability. So what amount of the time are the chargers available when we need to charge a bus? In the past, this isn't something we've really worried about. We didn't worry about was diesel going to come out of the fuel pump, but in this emerging space, this is something that's been a challenge and some lower availability we're seeing around the nation. So this is something we're keeping a close eye on. We had a really good year last year. We're starting to stabilize in a way and seeing improvement with the availability of chargers, particularly with the garage chargers after replacing them under warranty in 2021. We're also seeing an improvement in the availability with the on-route chargers, though as we go to the next metric on reliability, you'll see they do still pose a challenge for us of keeping them up and running. So looking at reliability, how often do we have to do unplanned maintenance? That's really what we're looking at here. So in this graph, the black is the garage chargers, those plug-in chargers, and that's really the backbone of our strategy and the transition plan moving forward. You can see here a sharp decline, which is good, in how often we have to do unplanned maintenance with those after replacing them under warranty. However, with the on-route chargers, we're still continuing to see an increase there. They're still continuing to present challenges and having to do work on them more than monthly that's not planned due to issues with them. So kind of summarizing, just doing a side-by-side of 2021 to 2022 here. Cells that are highlighted in green, those are areas where we're stable or seeing improvement as we continue to learn and gain experience. Orange, which is our energy cost per mile, and our infrastructure reliability, again, those en-route chargers, continue to be challenges for us. And we wanted to acknowledge we are in September reporting on 2022, so a little bit of a preview of how things are going so far this year and some preliminary findings from the first half of the year. As we start to get into year 4 here of operations, we're starting to see more battery cell replacements needed on the buses. So that is work being done under warranty by the vendors, but it is also impacting our bus availability. So you may recall in 2022, earlier in the presentation, we had 90% of scheduled miles, so what we planned to do, actually achieving it. First half of this year, we're only at 70%, and that's because we're seeing substantial lead time with supply chain to get those components, as well as extended time to do the work from the manufacturer. The other thing I commented on route charger reliability. Those units at Brooklyn Center Transit Center have been out of service since mid-June due to issues with the equipment. We're actively exploring what to do next with those, but we are still running the electric buses on the C line. We're just operating without those on-route chargers right now. We're continuing to have our equity and environmental justice prioritization met and continuing to work on energy costs per mile, as we talked about. So the last few things here, just a few project updates. The first one, you may have heard, we received a 2023 low and no emissions grant from the FTA. We're very excited about this. It's the largest grant we've received to date out of this program. So that's really going to help us move forward on the next steps here. And one of the key pieces in the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act is when we're doing these grant applications, we come up with the capital cost for the project, and then we have to add 5% for workforce development, which is part of those eligible grant funds. So this is going to help us move forward with the next cohort for the bus maintenance mechanic technician apprentice program, which we're excited about. We're also going to be working on some efforts on the infrastructure side to further develop our training materials there. And also happy to report that we're growing our staff to work on this program so we really can deliver on all the projects we've identified. A few projects real quick that these teams are working on. The photo on the right here is the substation room in the new North Loop garage. Maybe not that exciting to see a long room of gray boxes, but for us, we're really happy that they're there. We have 6 megawatts of power sitting in that room ready for charging, which is about 4 times a typical one of our light rail traction substations. So a lot of power to help us with this transition. We also have funding through these various grants in place for 20 40-foot electric buses and chargers to go with it that we're working on. And then the other facility we're focusing on right now is the East Metro Garage, which will be home to the Gold Line. So we're working closely with Excel right now to get the new power feeders in place. We'll be starting site preparation work in the spring, and then construction to follow for that. And the last thing I want to highlight, just to tie us back to our commitment to engagement, to sharing how this transition's going, sharing what we're learning, what's going well, what's challenging, is we have been very busy with engagement over the last year with a variety of events, tours, speaking engagements, talking with peer agencies, vendors, working groups. You can see it all here. And the next piece we'll be doing is stakeholder summits, inviting advocacy groups, neighborhood associations, anyone basically that's expressed interest in this program to date later this month. So the content will be almost identical to what you've seen here today, but still encourage you all, if you're interested, to register for that and just hear what we're being asked, what the community's interested in. And with that, we'll take any questions.
Thank you very much. Councilmember Vento.
Back on slide, thank you, Madam Chair. Back on slide 21, Carrie, the en-route, the en-route charger incidents. Can you describe the nature of those incidents a little bit for us?
We've seen Madam Chair, Councilmember Vento, we've seen a variety of incidents over the years ranging, and I will preface it by saying we quite literally have serial number 1 and 2 out there. And so a lot of it is things we're seeing having the first units in the field going through kind of real world environment. We've seen things from components that were not up to the duty cycle. So we've worked through re-engineering different circuits and fusing and things of that nature. We've seen climate-specific things, so working through making sure we've got the proper preventative maintenance procedures in place for the different seasons and cleaning and making sure we're isolating everything properly. We've seen communication challenges that worked through different software programming with the vendor, so a whole variety of things.
If I could, Madam Chair, and those en route incidences have occurred while in service. Have they taught anything about preventative actions that can be done?
Madam Chair, Council Member, some things we've seen have led to design changes that not only we're benefiting from, but they're being carried forward into future production cycles. So our peers are seeing them as well. The benefits of those. I apologize if I'm not answering your full question.
That's okay. It's early in the process, and I think it's going to take a while to learn a lot. I have one more question, I think. Could be more, but I'm going to try and work it down to one. I'm curious as to whether the size of the zero emissions bus plays a factor in it. If various sizes have different types of problems, more or less problems.
Thoughts on that?
Sure, I'll take that, Madam Chair, Council Member. So size does play a factor into overall capacity range. It does, the articulating buses do have some more mechanical, subsections within them. However, the base components, battery, electric motors, are transitional between the different operating systems or sizes.
But let's use the 40-foot. Are you seeing more or less with the 40-foot?
So, in general, what has been portrayed is that you'll see a better range with a 40-foot versus a 60-foot.
Thank you.
Yep.
So currently with our, we only have 60-foot electric buses. And they're the first articulated buses in the country. So when we're talking about serial numbers 1 and 2,
okay,
we're very seriously talking serial numbers 1 and 2.
Got it.
So we've learned a lot that a lot of people will benefit from all the things that we have learned. But overall, it's turning into a very successful program, but it did take a little bit to get there.
Well, and I have one other really profound question that I have to ask. Has there ever been a document printed within the Met Council, but definitely within the Met Transit world, that doesn't have a record number of I'm flaking on the word here, initials, acronyms. Honest to God, I almost feel like I should have a box of alphabet soup or a box of alphabet cereal when I'm reading the reports, just to kind of play the game along with it. It's amazing. And I'm slowly figuring them out.
I have a very good cheat sheet for acronyms that I will email to the committee. Additional questions? Councilmember Taylor.
Yeah, first of all, I wanted to applaud you for trying to move towards a greener operations in general. And the question I had was around carbon credits. Do we receive any carbon credits for your efforts and your?
Chair and Council Member, that's not something that's currently applicable in our jurisdiction. I know, to my knowledge at least, I know that's a common practice in California, for example, with the Air Resources Board there. But that's not applicable here to my knowledge.
Okay, that would be great in terms of savings.
Madam Chair, if I could, actually represent the council in MnDOT's greenhouse gas emission reduction working group. The 2023 legislation requires, beginning in February 2025, any highway expansion project would also need to mitigate, would have to evaluate and then mitigate the emissions that may result from that project. And mitigation options include transit. So it's one of the things we'll be looking at would be along those similar lines. Lots of details, lots of analysis, lots of unknowns, but it is in that vein, Councilmember.
Any additional questions or comments? I just want to comment, if we're done. You know, when we set off on doing this, it was coming up with a plan, everyone say, go make all your buses electric. And Carrie's smiling, but it's true. This is very true. And this zero emissions bus plan was something that was put into place to really look at things along the way to figure out what can we do, you know, what should we be doing, what can the electric grid take, you know, this really holistic picture of everything. And then having this and putting numbers to things to see what's working and what's not working, or where we can push, maybe push different levers and direct resources is really, really helpful. I mean, I think it's being honest about what the technology even can do right now and things like that. So I think it helps us as we're getting questions from constituents or different groups that we can answer. So thank you. The work is very well done and it's well presented, makes a lot of sense. So. All right, thank you. All right, if there's nothing else this evening, very good. You're adjourned.